Are you interested in learning how we can make our streets safer for everyone? Join us for the 10th Annual Safe Streets Summit on February 2nd and 3rd, 2023, at the Diplomat Beach Resort in Hollywood. The event will have an impressive lineup of local and national speakers. The Broward MPO is honored to be sponsoring this regional event in cooperation with our partners, the Miami-Dade TPO and the Palm Beach TPA. The Broward MPO is also hosting our second annual State of the Regions Awards on Thursday, February 2nd, 2023, when we will be reviewing the MPO's achievements from the past year and honor several of our local leaders for their contributions in transportation. We hope to see you there. For more information about both events, please visit our website at browardmpo.org. Welcome to Let's Talk Transportation, a podcast series of the Broward Metropolitan Planning Organization, also known as the MPO. We talk about the ins and outs of transportation in Broward County and all of Southeast Florida, why it matters, how it works, and the challenges and opportunities related to achieving great transportation. I'm your host, Greg Stewart, Executive Director of the MPO, and I'm joined by
Gail Bulfin, Senior Vice President of the Greater Fort Lauderdale Alliance, and a lucky member of several of the MPO's advisory boards.
Michael Udine, the Mayor of Broward County and a current board member on the Metropolitan Planning Organization, and someone who has a keen interest in transportation throughout Broward and South Florida.
Today we're here going to talk a little bit about the Sawgrass Connector, also known as Southwest 10th Street in Deerfield Beach. As a child growing up down here, I had the great opportunity to watch the Sawgrass Expressway get built. And during that time period, I didn't exactly understand why it ended at the Turnpike. Having the luxury of the Broward County Library System and the downtown library, years ago I found this book, and it was published back in 1972, and it laid out what was called the Port Everglades Expressway, the Sawgrass Expressway, the Sterling Expressway, and the Cypress Creek Expressway, and it all connected to I-95 and the Turnpike. However, the only thing that really got built was the Sawgrass and 595, also known as Port Everglades Expressways. So, I wonder if you want to maybe talk a little bit about your knowledge about why you thought that ended there, and then what we've done since to actually get the thing extended.
So I also remember when I was former mayor of Parkland doing some research and learning also about the University Parkway, which was supposed to go through the west side of the county, and that was terminated and turned into some different type of transportation methods. Living in Parkland and growing up in South Florida and in Coral Springs, watching the Sawgrass get built was really a boom for the west side of the county. I mean, when they first built it, everyone used to say, I don't get it. Why are they building this here? There aren't the cars out here. There aren't the people out here. And then what's happened to the population shift out in that area has really been transformational and has really allowed Broward County to build out. It's made cities like Parkland, Coral Springs, and cities out in the west, Weston, and the like. But there is a problem because that road and that expressway should never have stopped at the Turnpike. I get it. People that are involved get it. Politics sometimes rears its head, and strong voting blocs at the time are usually able to try and move things that they don't want in their backyards. I understand that. I appreciate it, but I think that it leads to outcomes that aren't optimal, and that's an outcome that's not optimal. I drive that every day. If I'm going to the Turnpike South, I kind of get backed up when it ends there. If you're going through to 95, then you're now on city streets, and it becomes a much harder and a much more bottleneck traffic result that I think hurts everybody in the long run. So I'm really thankful that they're moving forward with this, and I look forward to participating where I can.
So, Gail, you actually participated on our oversight committee. That was actually public outreach prior to the planning and environmental development study that is in finishing up right now at FDOT for the connector between the Turnpike and I-95. Your experiences on that committee, can you kind of explain what you had the opportunity to see firsthand?
Sure, absolutely. And I was privileged to be asked to serve on that committee. It was my first committee with the MPO, and I wasn't quite sure what to expect. But this particular project was of interest to me because while, Greg, you were just a child when the Sawgrass was being built, I may have been a tiny bit older. And I saw two very important leaders in that project. The man who was the visionary behind the Sawgrass and the gentleman who was very important in his retirement community who did not want it built.
Trenchy Trenchatelli was the man's name.
Trenchy.
Absolutely. And I saw those two butt heads and both become winners and both become losers in a way. So when I was asked to sit on this committee, it was very meaningful for me. And when you talk to the neighbors, they were upset that there was so much traffic that had just organically happened between the Sawgrass and 95. So much so that those streets were becoming harder and harder for them to navigate. And so the idea of having a dedicated fast street that went directly from Sawgrass to 95 would allow them to kind of reclaim their neighborhoods a bit. And it was emotional. It was thoughtful. There was a ton of research. There was many people involved in it. There were tears. There was laughter. It was like a movie drama. But in the end, I think we really felt like we understood the project and we were happy to have had a chance to weigh in.
And the principles that kind of came out of that committee, and that's really the important thing, guided the entire process that the Florida Department of Transportation used for coming up with a design solution. And I know personally I was advocating for a depressed roadway where that way the east and west traffic on 10th Street would have been on either side of the depression. And then there could have actually been crosswalks and parks in between. That would have taken another extra decade, according to FDOT, to build because of constraints. And so I know that they moved the expressway itself over towards Century Village and then putting up a solid wall there, sound barrier, and then created more of a complete streets calm traffic area that will be serving the Waterford and the housing like Crystal Lake. So the big picture with all of that, what type of conversations, Gail, did you have with the residents that were going to be immediately impacted?
I think there was a lot of emotion because it involved change, and people were not sure what that change was going to bring, and they were a little distrustful of someone making a decision on their behalf. So having those candid conversations, I think in some ways it was a discussion about what's best and what can we afford. And that's where the rub was all throughout the whole discussion. And I think there were some concessions made on both sides. And I know the neighbors, after going through this process, realized that there's a lot more behind a transportation project than just putting a road down the middle of a street or an area that doesn't have a road. So there was a lot of understanding, and I think that in the end, you got a lot more buy-in from people being involved right from the beginning.
Mary Udine, you were out in Parkland serving on the town council out there at the time. But what does this mean to now at the county level? You're more of a regional look. So between Parkland and Coral Springs and Coconut Creek and even all the way down to Sunrise, how does that necessarily, what are you hearing from your constituents? Is there still a demand? People are saying, yeah, we need to get this done?
Yes, there's still a major demand to get this done. And I think that, like Gail said, nobody likes change. And I remember serving on the MPO back in 03 and 04 when we put the sound walls in by the Sawgrass near Parkland, and we put the sound walls in certain spots on the Turnpike. Some of those probably were on the closer side to whether they were justified by the statistics that they used to build these sound walls. But we got them done, and we have sound walls through Parkland and Coral Springs where the Sawgrass goes through. And the world didn't come to an end. The housing values still stayed high. The people are still happy. It's safe. You have, positive traffic flow. And I think that what I'm hearing from my constituents are, this is not only a traffic issue, this is an economic development issue. When you look out in Coral Springs, you have this major warehouses, you have Tamarack, you have major business parks, and those require, and they're able to promote themselves by a better access to major, I'll use one of my MPO word, arterial roads, and to get to 95 quicker is a big positive for those values and those businesses. So while I, welcome the idea of a depressed roadway, even though I really want more of a positive roadway, I don't want a depressed roadway, I think that whatever we can do to make this happen sooner, I think is of benefit. I mean, to tell people now they're going to have to wait another 10 years or another 15 years, I don't think that that's really something that serves us well. We see now every day, and our residents voted on it with the penny sales tax. They're willing to do what they need to do. They're willing to make creative solutions. They're willing even to pay for it, to make it easier to get around the county in South Florida. And I think we should all heed that call.
I agree. The mayor actually, Gail, talked about the economic development side, and that's actually a part and parcel of what the MPO does. Our roadway network and our transportation system is all about economic development down here. It's not just about moving cars from one location to another. Wearing your alliance hat for the Greater Fort Lauderdale Alliance, what do you see as the benefit for the industry, our side of employment for this particular connector?
Thank you, Greg. The Alliance is the county's economic development partner. So our primary job is to market Broward as a business destination and to manage projects of companies thinking about relocating or expanding within targeted industries. So ease of access is really important. I think that for many of our companies, access to the airport, seaports, major highways allow them to move goods and perform services. And that is a critical aspect for their decision making in moving here to Broward County.
And that's actually phenomenal. So that whole idea of attracting and retaining and growing the businesses that we have is super important. And the transportation system drives that, no pun intended. But, that's actually the important part, because the connectivity that we're showing here and working together with the rest of the state, it's, what comes out of Port Everglades, what comes out of Port Miami, how we move things in the region. Bob Ledoux from FECR, he's not only just moving on trains, they're also moving trailers. So this is all really important for that synergy to occur down here. And the more we can attract businesses, the better off we are. The connectivity side, I'm going to go back to that again. When we started the project, and Gail, you're going to remember that DOT had started with the idea of just having this a managed lanes project, and that it was going to connect the managed lanes from I-95 out to the Sawgrass. City of Deerfield Beach, in the conversation said, hey, no, we don't want that. We want it to be open. We want it to be for all people to be able to use. That was a siren call from even the residents of Century Village. What did you think when that was that conversation was happening?
Well, I saw a lot of passion. I loved that people who feel so strongly about the communities that they live in, and they understand the role of transportation in quality of life. So those managed lanes or those high-speed lanes, yes, they're important to connect Sawgrass to 95, but you still needed to have access to the residents who lived in that area to be able to utilize this great new transportation feature. And so I think that recognition that you can do both and that there were two things that this project needed to be able to solve was important for both the residents and for the businesses.
Mayor, when we talk about this particular project, you and I've had private conversations, which I'm looking forward to continuing. But that said, right now in our budget, there's about $800 million assigned for this particular project. It's only, 2 miles, Gail? Mm-hmm. So, when you look at the actual cost of this thing, it's significant. And, but the return on the investment is great as well. And we're talking about, what do you think after this would be the next major project we should be seeing here in Broward?
I think when we talk about those numbers and people in transportation, they just don't understand how expensive a lot of this is. And I think that it goes to the fact that sometimes we feel, all of us collectively, and the community feels that it takes a long time to plan these things out right. But I think that this project is something that we can learn from because it gets much more expensive as you go on and as you have to add to these things later. So when they planned this out 30, 40, whatever many years ago, people came in, there was parochialism, there was NIMBYism, and they stopped a piece of this road that could have probably been done at the time. And it would have been interesting to see what the cost would have been then when you didn't have to take as much right of way, when you didn't have anything built up. It would have been nowhere near $800 million. So to pay $400 million a mile now, I think is a good lesson for us to learn as we move forward with any transportation project. And I'm guilty like everybody else. I want things to be done right away. I want things to happen right away. But I think sometimes we lose sight of the fact if we don't plan this stuff out right, it comes back and it costs us a lot more, on the back end when we have to fix things. So what does that mean? It means let's look at these projects like the FEC commuter rail. Let's plan it the right way. Let's look at, different roadway, light rail, rapid transport, pedestrian ways, pedestrian walkability of streets. And let's make sure that we plan these things out right. And let's make sure that we think a little bit more regionally as opposed to, you can build a train route, but it's not coming through this street where it needs to go. I mean, and I use that as a joking example, but everyone comes in and steps in and it makes these things way more expensive. And it makes these things undoable. And it makes it harder for the people that have to use these systems day in and day out.
And Greg, can I just add one thing? When we started that COAT project, you said to us, the collective group, think big. You encouraged us to not tie our hands on any preconceived notion, to think big. And I agree with the mayor. I think that you have these chances once in a lifetime to open up roads, to take a look at how to move people from one place to another. Think big. And because this is the only time you're going to have to tackle that particular project. And I think that's the role of government that's so important, to do the big things that the average citizen can't do. We rely on the engineers that take a look at these projects and to help us become the community we want it to be.
But, as I've sat here for years, Mayor, I watched us also when we cancel projects like you talked about. And, when it gets too parochial and when people stop thinking big, we lose things. One of our former board members, Romney Rogers, I was talking to him the other day and we were talking just a little spit road that's Cordova Drive. It's off a 17th Street Causeway. And it was a $2 million project. And we were coming in to do some work to actually increase the parking and safety on that facility. That money, when they turned it away, and it was a bunch of local people saying, hey, no, kill this thing now. I went to visit it, and it's actually up in Panama City. And it's a beautiful street with pedestrian lighting and sidewalks. And that's something we need to recognize, too, as we're talking to the residents down here. If we choose to kill things constantly, we don't get to keep the money. It doesn't stay here. It has to be programmed somewhere. It has to be spent. So that's when you go back to that big thinking, and you have to have that. I really appreciate, I think, the time that you both have spent with us today. Really appreciate it a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Greg.
The Let's Talk Transportation podcast is produced by the Broward MPO, where every day we fund and implement projects that move people and goods, create jobs, and strengthen communities. Learn more at browardmpo.org and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Speak Up Broward. If there is a transportation topic you'd like to know more about, let us know by sending an email to info@browardmpo.org. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance in the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Views and opinions expressed by MPO employees are those of the employees and do not necessarily reflect the view of the MPO or any of its officials. For complaints, questions, or concerns about civil rights or non-discrimination, or for special requests under the Americans with Disabilities Act, please contact Carl Ema, Title VI Coordinator at 954-876-0052 or EMAC at browardmpo.org.